Imagine you're 16 years old. You're sitting in a classroom staring at a book written 100 years before you were born. You've got a mountain of math homework. You're stressed about your science grades, and you're thinking, why am I doing this? How is reading this old text going to help me get a job in the future? Most of us have had that same thought, and that frustration, that feeling right there is actually the heart of today's question. People say that it is a waste of time for high school students to learn literature at school. To what extent do you agree or disagree? With this question, you can agree or disagree. What matters is that your ideas are clear and well developed. Personally, I disagree. I think literature has a lot of practical value, but to see that value, we need to look at what actually happens in a literature class. Think about the process. First, your teacher asks you to read a book. At that stage, you're just following the story, but then something changes. After reading, you're asked to analyze. Why did a character make a certain choice? What is the writer trying to make you feel? What's really going on beneath the surface? That's the key. Studying literature is really just the combination of reading stories and analyzing them. So when the question asks whether this is a waste of time, my answer is no. I disagree with that idea. And to explain why, we need to build a clear argument, one idea at a time. Let's think out loud for a moment. Why is studying stories a good use of a student's time? Most of us only really know our own lives. That's where most people naturally begin. A story puts you inside the mind of someone else, maybe someone dealing with a problem you've never experienced yourself. When you step into someone else's situation like that, you start to understand how other people think and feel. You're building empathy, whether you realize it or not. So let's challenge this idea for a second. Is empathy really a waste of time? No. In real life, understanding people is a huge advantage, especially in jobs where you need to work with others. So our first idea is simple. Literature isn't a waste of time because it helps us understand other people. That's the idea we'll build the paragraph around. Let's build this paragraph. This is where we make one clear argument for why literature isn't a waste of time. This first sentence tells the reader two things: my position and the main idea this paragraph will focus on. I disagree that literature is a waste of time because studying stories helps students understand people who are different from themselves. I'm not explaining or proving anything yet. I'm just clearly stating the argument this paragraph is going to support. Now, I need to develop that idea. I start by describing what actually happens when students study literature. Whether they are analyzing a classic play or a modern series like Harry Potter, students are forced to see the world through the eyes of characters facing difficult life challenges. Here I'm showing how studying stories works in practice. I'm taking the idea from the first sentence and making it more concrete. Here I step outside the classroom and show how this experience matters in real life. This process builds empathy, which is a vital skill that helps young people communicate and work well with others in their future careers. This is where the paragraph becomes practical. I'm connecting literature to a skill people actually need in real life. Finally, I bring everything back to the original question and make my position clear again. Because these social skills are so important in the workplace, studying literature is actually a very productive use of school hours. And here, I close the loop. I directly reject the idea that studying literature is a waste of time. Now, we've built this paragraph one sentence at a time. Now let's read it as a full paragraph. I disagree that literature is a waste of time because studying stories helps students understand people who are different from themselves. Whether they are analyzing a classic play or a modern series like Harry Potter, students are forced to see the world through the eyes of characters facing difficult life challenges. This process builds empathy, which is a vital skill that helps young people communicate and work well with others in their future careers. Because these social skills are so important in the workplace, studying literature is actually a very productive use of school hours. We begin by clearly disagreeing with the idea that literature is a waste of time. Next, we describe what students actually do when they study stories, showing how they step into other people's experiences. Then we move beyond the classroom and explain how this builds empathy, a skill that is valuable in real working environments. Finally, we return to the original question and make it clear that because these skills matter in the workplace, studying literature is not a waste of time at all. Let's think out loud again. Why else might studying literature be a good use of a student's time? When you read a story, you don't just accept everything at face value. You start asking questions. You ask things like, is the narrator being honest? What is the writer really trying to say here? This kind of questioning trains you to think carefully instead of just absorbing information. So let's challenge this idea. Is learning how to question information a waste of time? Not at all. In a world full of social media and advertising, being able to spot misleading information really matters. Our second idea is just as straightforward. Studying literature teaches us how to analyze what we read. All right, let's build our second paragraph. Here, we're making a different argument, but the goal is the same. Support our position that studying literature is not a waste of time. This first sentence introduces the new idea of the paragraph and clearly shows what this part of the essay will focus on. Furthermore, literature is an excellent tool for helping high school students develop their critical thinking skills. I'm still keeping this general. I'm stating the idea clearly without details yet. Now, I explain how studying literature actually develops this skill. Instead of simply memorizing facts, students must question the motivations of characters and identify the underlying messages an author is trying to communicate. Here, I'm describing what students actively do when they study stories. This shows where the critical thinking comes from. Now I step outside the classroom and connect this skill to everyday life. In a world full of social media and advertising, this ability to analyze stories helps students judge information carefully rather than believing everything they read online. This is the real-world payoff. I'm connecting literary analysis to everyday decision-making. Finally, I close the paragraph by returning to the idea of a waste of time and answering it directly. Therefore, the analytical habits developed through studying literature are highly practical and far from a waste of time. And here, I make the position clear again and bring the paragraph to a natural stop. All right, let's take a step back and read the full paragraph together. Furthermore, literature is an excellent tool for helping high school students develop their critical thinking skills. Instead of simply memorizing facts, students must question the motivations of characters and identify the underlying messages an author is trying to communicate. In a world full of social media and advertising, this ability to analyze stories helps students judge information carefully rather than believing everything they read online. Therefore, the analytical habits developed through studying literature are highly practical and far from a waste of time. We start by introducing critical thinking as a second reason why studying literature is valuable. Then we explain what students actually do when they analyze stories, showing how this skill develops in the classroom. Next, we move into the modern world and show why this ability matters when students are faced with social media and online information. Finally, we return to the original question and make it clear that skills like this are practical, useful, and far from a waste of time. So to wrap up, we disagreed with the idea that studying literature is a waste of time. We supported that position with two ideas. First, that stories help students understand other people, and second, that analyzing texts builds critical thinking. In both cases, we showed how these skills develop in class and why they matter in the real world. That's why this argument works. It's clear, it's logical, and every paragraph directly supports the position. Now it's your turn. Pick a side, choose two ideas, and think through the logic behind each one. If your ideas are clear, the paragraph will write itself.